Chapter 10, Part 2, Pests and Pesticides. Pesticide terms. To understand the discussion about pesticide, you need to know the different types of pesticides. A pesticide refers to any chemical that kills a pest or even could potentially drive them away. Pesticides can be considered biocides if it's a compound that kills a wide range of living things. Biocides are the most dangerous pesticide to use because they could kill non-target organisms as well. Herbicides are pesticides that kill only plants, insecticides focus on killing insects, and fungicides are determined to kill only fungus. History of pesticides. The use of metals and inorganic chemicals has been recorded for over 5,000 years being used as pesticides. This dates back to Sumerian times as well as Egyptian times. Synthetic pesticides were developed in 1939 by Paul Mueller. The first pesticide developed was DDT. This is a familiar pesticide because it was the one that we found in the 1960s to be causing environmental damage and to be bioaccumulating up the food chain. So that's why DDT was then banned later on. Additional synthetic pesticides have been developed starting in the 1940s. However, most of these were still found to be just as harmful as DDT. In the 1960s, when these concerns were raised with the publishing of the book Silent Spring, we realized that we needed to rethink our look at pesticides and come up with something that was more environmentally friendly. Pesticide use in the United States. Currently, almost half the pesticides we use are used for water purification, and then a quarter of the pesticides we used are considered conventional pesticides. These are most likely what you think of when you think of pesticides, treating for insects, weeds, or fungus in crops. 80% of these are used in agriculture and food storage. That will be out of the quarter of the pesticides that are considered conventional pesticides. And also, 3/4 of American homes use pesticides yearly in their own yards or gardens. Types of pesticides. There are several different types of pesticides. The next few slides will discuss these. Organophosphates is a synthetic pesticide. This is the most widely used type of pesticide. It breaks down quickly in the environment, but it can pose potential hazards to workers who are not handling it appropriately or who may re-enter a field too quickly after it has been applied. An example of an organophosphate would be the pesticide Roundup, which is an herbicide used to kill weeds, and most likely you've heard of this to use on our lawns or sidewalks to get rid of weeds. Most plants that are treated with Roundup are considered to be, quote, Roundup ready because they can withstand the Roundup pesticide, but the weeds around them cannot. The next type of pesticide is chlorinated hydrocarbons, also called organochlorines, and these are persistent and highly toxic in the environment, and they can also leak in and contaminate the water supply and bioaccumulate. Examples of these are atrazine, which is an herbicide, and then DDT is our most famous example of this. Fumigants is a pesticide that comes in the form of small molecules that are delivered in a gaseous form. These are chemical compounds used to control fungus, prevent decay, and prevent rodent and insect infestation. These can be dangerous to workers who are applying them if they do not take the proper precautions. Inorganic pesticides are compounds of toxic elements. Examples would be any mixture using arsenic, sulfur, copper, or mercury. These are highly toxic pesticides because they are nerve toxins, and they will remain in the environment indefinitely because they will not break down. So these are also considered very widely be used and end up hitting non-target organisms. Natural organic pesticides, also called botanicals, are made from plant extracts. These can be toxic to insects or prevent wood decay. Examples of natural organic pesticides are nicotine from the tobacco plant and turpentine. Microbial agents and biological controls are living organisms or toxins produced by living organisms that we use to help rid us of pests. These will naturally kill insects. An example of this is the Bt bacteria that is applied to certain crops, or the genes are used in certain crops, and they actually prevent and kill off insects in that area. Environmental effects. The main risk that we consider when using pesticide is the exposure of non-target organisms. These could include people as well as animals and other plants. There are also risks associated with overuse of pesticides. We can have a pest resurgence, which is a rebound of resistant populations, and because the pest becomes adapted, where one or two will survive because they are resistant, and then they will overpopulate and become the main genetic variation, causing a resurgence in the pest, and then this pesticide that they have become resistant to now needs to be eliminated because it no longer is effective. We also run the risk of bioaccumulation. Persistent organic pollutants is the term that we use for chlorinated hydrocarbons such as DDT, which become environmental nightmares as they do not dissipate for years or decades and then accumulate through the food chain. An example of persistent organic pollutants would be what happens during the grasshopper effect, where these contaminants can be evaporated from water or soil in warm areas where they've been applied. They then condense and precipitate to colder regions as the wind patterns blow the clouds, and then they will fall down and actually cause pollution in an area where they were not used. Finally, we want to look at human concerns when it comes to use of pesticides. We have both acute and chronic effects. Acute effects from pesticides include poisoning and illness from high doses and accidental exposure. Chronic effects include long-term exposure, which results in cancer, birth defects, immunological problems, endometriosis, neurological problems, Parkinson's disease, and other degenerative diseases. We find that worldwide 25 million poisonings happen per year, which results in 20,000 deaths. 2/3 of these exposures are due to not wearing protective clothing or considering proper warnings, usually in developing countries.